Breaking news tonight, the streets of Tehran are absolutely on fire, echoing with the deafening roar of a revolution that has finally arrived. The most devastating strike against the Ayatollah's dictatorship has emerged from the Grand Bazaar, where commerce has ground to a complete and total halt, crippling the economy. Following a cascade of chaotic events, every single storefront has gone dark, signaling that 0 hour is finally upon us after decades of waiting. The Islamic terror regime is crumbling before our very eyes, validating the stern warnings issued by President Trump regarding the consequences of tyranny. The White House made it crystal clear that the United States would unleash severe repercussions if a single hair on a protester's head was harmed. Tonight marks the historic implosion of a 47-year-old theocracy that many thought would never fall in our lifetime. The massive security apparatus that Supreme Leader Khamenei bragged was impenetrable, built on billions of stolen dollars, has turned out to be nothing more than a paper tiger. This wasn't destroyed by a foreign airstrike or a Tomahawk missile, but by a stunning, historic betrayal that no one in the intelligence community saw coming. It started from the inside out, sparking a rebellion the exact moment a courageous Iranian officer stepped in front of a camera lens to defy his superiors. He looked dead into the lens and declared that they are fully prepared to take whatever action is necessary to dismantle the Islamic Republic once and for all. That statement served as the death knell for the regime, officially announcing the end of a dark era across the entire Middle East. It is now confirmed that the very security forces paid to protect Khamenei have turned their backs on him, leaving the supreme leader completely isolated. We have reached a critical historical pivot point, with reports confirming that the city of Abdanan has fallen entirely into the hands of the people. The incredible footage rolling across your screens right now isn't an invasion force. It is the raw, uncut documentation of a nation liberating itself. Instead of gunning down civilians, we are seeing police officers lowering their weapons and actually celebrating the regime's demise alongside the protesters. They are standing shoulder to shoulder on the rooftops of police precincts, while the regime's feared elite enforcers are nowhere to be found. Reports indicate that members of the IRGC Revolutionary Guard are frantically dumping their uniforms in trash cans and fleeing into the night like cowards. The Tehran Stock Exchange and the Grand Bazaar have slammed their doors shut, signaling that this is anything but a typical day in the Persian capital. We are witnessing the real-time collapse of a brutal totalitarian dictatorship brought down not by external war, but by its own internal civil uprising. This is the moment the ancient Persian nation rises like a phoenix from the ashes of theocracy to reclaim its rightful place in history. The situation in Iran is a massive geopolitical flashpoint, and while some mainstream platforms hesitate to cover the raw truth, we don't hold back here. Big tech often throttles these controversial stories, debating whether they fit the narrative, but we are committed to bringing you the unfiltered reality. We are going to break down the hard facts and bring the unvarnished truth directly to you, our loyal audience. Stories like this get buried by the algorithms unless we actively push back and demand that the world pays attention to what is happening. Engaging with this story matters because history shows us that it isn't just the roar of the crowds that topples dictatorships. It is the deafening silence of the men in uniform who finally decide to stand down and refuse to arrest their own countrymen. What is unfolding on the ground in Iran right now is not your garden variety social unrest or a simple protest movement. This is a classic Praetorian betrayal where the very sword that was sharpened to protect the regime is suddenly turned against its master. The definitive turning point occurred when a high-ranking officer from the Air Force stepped forward, shattering the chain of command. He appeared on camera knowing full well he was risking the lives of his entire family and signing his own death warrant to speak the truth. He doubled down on the message that the military is ready to take decisive action to completely obliterate the Islamic Republic's control. This is a historic milestone on par with the moment the Egyptian military turned its tanks away from the people in Tahrir Square. It mirrors the collapse of the Iron Curtain when the Romanian army abandoned Ceausescu, leaving the dictator to face the wrath of the people. Incredible video footage has surfaced showing an Iranian police officer ripping down a poster of the supreme leader and setting it ablaze. He didn't stop there. He took a can of spray paint and boldly tagged a message on the wall for the whole world to see. The officer sprayed the words Javed Shah, a powerful slogan that expresses a deep nostalgia for the pre-revolutionary Pahlavi dynasty. For those who don't know, that phrase translates to "Long live the king," signaling a desire to return to the era before the mullahs took power. The Iranian people draw a sharp line in the sand between the regular national army known as the Artesh and the radicalized Revolutionary Guard. As noted by geopolitical analysts, the public has long held onto the hope that the regular army would eventually side with the nation against the regime. The city of Abdanan in Ilam province has etched its name in history books as the first domino to fall and become a fully liberated city. Government officials have fled the area in a panic, leaving protesters to seize full control of municipal buildings and command centers. The fall of Abdanan serves as a vital proof of concept for the other 70 major cities watching and waiting to make their move. Once a major city falls, that psychological barrier is shattered forever, and the direction of the tanks has officially turned against the oppressors. Military personnel are now being spotted waving the lion and sun flag of the Shah's era, proving this is far more than simple disobedience. It is definitive proof that their allegiance no longer belongs to the legacy of Khomeini, but to the deep historical roots of their ancient country. When you see an active-duty soldier ripping the regime's patch off his uniform and replacing it with the flag of the monarchy he is supposed to be suppressing, it is not just a violation of protocol, it is checkmate for the ruling class. The paralyzing fear, which was once the single most powerful weapon in the regime's arsenal, has completely flipped sides and is now haunting the oppressors. For decades, the mere mention of the Revolutionary Guard was enough to send shivers down the spine of the average citizen, keeping the population in total submission. But now we are witnessing a stunning reversal where those same Revolutionary Guards are terrified to even step foot on the pavement while wearing their official uniforms. We are getting confirmed reports flooding in from major cities, particularly the suburbs of Tehran, and deep into the rural belts showing security forces abandoning their vehicles, stripping off their gear, and fleeing in plain clothes to blend in. For any totalitarian state, the absolute worst-case nightmare isn't an invasion. It is the moment when the police force decides to retreat rather than crack down on the population. Or even more catastrophic for the leadership when those officers lower their riot shields and actually choose to march alongside the protesters. This is the total bankruptcy of allegiance, and we are seeing a prime example of this collapse unfolding right now in the city of Abdanan. Instead of firing into the crowd and fueling the public's rage, the police force there made a conscious choice to honor the badge by joining the revolution while keeping their uniforms on. The visuals coming out of the region showing police officers standing shoulder to shoulder with civilians on the rooftops of their own precincts act as the final nail in the coffin for Khamenei's grip on power. However, do not mistake this for a peaceful transition across the board. The situation in Nord has escalated into something far more volatile and kinetic. Citizens who have lived under the boot of oppression for years are now turning the tables and openly chasing the regime's security forces down the very streets they used to patrol. The predator has become the prey. We are seeing uniformed personnel running for their lives with the civilian population hot on their heels. This proves that the state's authority isn't just crumbling, it is actively inverting. And the long-held myth of their absolute invincibility has evaporated into thin air. We are talking about the Revolutionary Guard here, the regime's most trusted, ruthless, and elite fighting force. Despite being pumped full of billions of dollars in funding over the years, their terrifying reputation has gone completely shattered in the face of this uprising. Across multiple regions, IRGC bases are being stormed, overrun, and captured by the public, offering zero effective resistance against the sheer volume of public anger. But here's the critical pivot point: crowds are not just protesting. They are breaching strategic food storage facilities. They are seizing control of commercial complexes and massive resource stockpiles owned by the Guard, effectively reclaiming the nation's wealth. This presents a geopolitical irony that is the exact polar opposite of the humanitarian crisis scenarios we have seen in places like Gaza. A leadership that spent years starving its own population under the guise of economic sanctions is now staring down the barrel of its own famine because the people have looted their private reserves. This is what military analysts call a catastrophic logistical collapse. If a regime cannot feed its own enforcers, it cannot fight a war, and right now, the failing heart of this system is skipping beats at the famous Grand Bazaar in Tehran. The Grand Bazaar has always acted as the historical pressure valve and the ultimate political barometer for Iranian society. History tells us clearly, whenever the merchants of the bazaar turn their backs on the leadership, the government falls within weeks, just like we saw happen to the Shah back in 1979. Today, those metal shutters are down, but make no mistake, this is not a protest about tax hikes or skyrocketing inflation rates. It has closed due to a calculated, strictly political general strike with chants for liberty echoing through the empty alleyways of the market district. We have reached a tipping point where the merchant class, the entrepreneurs, and the power brokers of the business world have completely abandoned any hope in the current administration. They have shifted the narrative from complaining about an economic crisis to actively participating in a regime change crisis. A total market shutdown means the country's financial arteries are severed. Cash flow is dead, and the government simply cannot fund its day-to-day operations. The fractures within the system are shooting upward from the streets all the way to the presidential palace. In a shocking development, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian went live on state television and made an unprecedented confession, literally admitting, "I am guilty." He went on to absolve the public, stating clearly that the fault lies with the leadership, not the citizens. He insisted that the government needs to radically correct its behavior, but that sounds like desperation at this stage. This statement is the highest level confirmation yet that the regime has zero domestic legitimacy left, and they can no longer use the tired excuse of foreign agents or outside meddling. When the captain starts apologizing for navigation errors while the ship is already half submerged, you know there is absolutely no saving the vessel. This admission represents a massive psychological breakdown that exposes the regime's frailty and will only embolden the indecisive masses to flood the streets. We are seeing reports from government buildings and even active military barracks where the symbols of power are being physically swapped out. The theological banner of the regime is being lowered and replaced by the historic lion and sun emblem, or the simple national tricolor of Iran. This is not just a wardrobe change, this is a full-scale ideological purge happening in real time. Citizens are tearing down symbols that represent 47 years of oppressive rule and are reclaiming their historic national identity. Make no mistake, this is not a religious sectarian conflict. This is a fight for the very soul of the nation. When soldiers switch the flags on their shoulders, it is the most concrete signal possible that their loyalty has shifted from the supreme leader's office to the Iranian people themselves. And let's be clear, these protests have spiraled way beyond just the rural outliers or the Kurdish regions. The unrest has slammed into the heavy industrial centers of Iran, threatening the core infrastructure of the state. We are getting some absolutely startling footage coming out of Fulad Shar, just a stone's throw from Isfahan, and it paints a clear picture this uprising has crossed the Rubicon and reached a point of no return. What we are seeing is a massive unified coalition: blue-collar steelworkers, university students, shopkeepers, and the suburban middle class all joining forces to completely sever the regime's economic arteries. Industrial production has ground to a screeching halt, and the streets have descended into what can only be described as organized chaos. The sheer scale and ferocious determination of the crowds in Fulad Shar completely debunk the administration's narrative that this unrest is just a minor issue isolated to a few pockets of the country. As political analyst Murad Vaisi has been warning us repeatedly, the Khamenei regime is teetering on the brink of total collapse, and like every desperate dictator in the history books, he is about to play his final card, ramping up the violence to manufacture chaos. We are expecting the regime to make one last frantic Hail Mary attempt to claw back the control that is slipping through their fingers like sand, by launching a scorched earth campaign of bloodshed and trying to instill pure terror into the population. However, Vaisi adds a critical game-changing detail here: killing civilians is a war crime, and once this house of cards comes crashing down, public fury is going to zero in squarely on the enforcers who pulled the triggers. That warning is sending a chill down the spines of the security apparatus. There's a very real fear of facing a modern-day Nuremberg trial among the officers currently following orders. We are seeing security forces refusing to follow commands today purely to save their own skins from being prosecuted in the tribunals of tomorrow. The regime's violence card is backfiring spectacularly because the very machine built to enforce it is paralyzed by fear of future accountability. Meanwhile, from his exile, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is broadcasting messages that are cutting through the noise, providing a crucial moral compass and a unified vision to what was previously just raw, leaderless anger exploding in the streets. His call for discipline and a structured transition plan signals a massive shift. This is morphing from uncontrolled rioting into a sophisticated, organized revolution with a clear endgame. When you hear people chanting pro-Shah slogans in the city squares, do not mistake it for simple nostalgia. It is a symbol of a deep hunger for law and order, economic prosperity, and national pride, a direct rejection of the financial ruin, corruption, and anarchy this regime has brought to their doorstep. The Iranian people are looking at the wreckage around them and realizing that this 45-year theocratic experiment has been an abject failure. And they are demanding a return to the stability and normalcy that still lives in their collective historical memory. And make no mistake, this time is different. The international community is not hitting the snooze button like they did back in 2009 or 2019. The massive Iranian diaspora and global media networks have created an information pipeline that remains open even as the regime tries to pull the plug on the domestic internet. Thanks to Starlink terminals, high-tech VPNs, and courageous citizen journalists on the ground, the regime has lost the ability to commit mass murder in the dark with the excuse that no one is watching. Every single bullet fired and every wrongful arrest goes viral on social media within seconds, ratcheting up international pressure and tightening the noose around the mullahs' necks. This radical transparency has stripped away the regime's cloak of invisibility. They can no longer operate in the shadows. The security forces are finding their capacity for brutality severely handcuffed, because the eyes of the entire world are fixed upon them, giving the protesters the ultimate moral high ground. The Iranian people have finally smashed through the psychological wall of fear that the state has spent 45 years constructing. When the city of Abadan fell, what used to be a theoretical possibility of regime change instantly transformed into a concrete, proven reality. We are seeing police officers flipping sides, the army signaling neutrality, the bazaars shutting their doors, and even the president issuing admissions of failure. Any single one of these events would be enough to destabilize a government, but having them all hit simultaneously makes the outcome mathematically inevitable. Total collapse. We are way past the beginning of the end, folks. This is the absolute end. Khamenei's authority is now nothing more than ink on paper, while true legitimacy has returned to the streets. That flag waving over Abadan isn't just about one city. It represents the blueprint for the future of the entire Iranian nation. History is being written in real time before our eyes. We are witnessing the death rattle of a dictatorship, marking a seismic geopolitical shift for the entire Middle East. We saw a tectonic shift like this once before when the monarchy fell decades ago. That was a massive rupture, but what is coming down the pipe now looks infinitely larger. Nothing in the world, and especially in the Middle East, is ever going to be the same again. Thanks so much for tuning into this breaking report. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay ahead of the curve on these developments. We are dedicated to bringing you the unvarnished truth and the most accurate analysis as these historic events unfold.